Hello, Gunner James 105. So I've got a deactivated firearm today. There's not a lot of deactivated in the collection, but in order to have something that's original, that's full auto, that's the only way in Canada, unless you have a special license, prohibited license, which I don't. So this is deactivated, but it would be what you'd call old spec deactivated, whereas you're able to remove the magazine and you're able to cock it and do as such. You can't move the selector lever from full to semi, but you can move and that's how they rotate. So you can move the safety. So this was the final version, military version of the Thompson, which, you know, its history goes back to John T. Thompson. It was John, John's. He had come up with the idea for the first version in 1918. So I'm going to set this down on the table, give you some information. I'm going to take it apart. I can say that also part of the deactivation, so once I get this open, you'll see that the bolt is cut. There is a rod that's up in here that blocks off the barrel. So that blocks the barrel. The bolt is cut. Magazine, regardless of whether it can fire or not, they all have to be pinned with a rivet to 5 rounds maximum. This thing could load 5 rounds, but you're not going to attempt firing anything with this. There is a pin that goes up in here to stop that from being switched over to full auto. So that's part of the deactivation. But other than that, it can be taken apart completely. So I'll do that. So let me set this down and be right with you. Okay, so I had completed my video and discovered that I had neglected to show a thing or three or explain a certain thing. So I put in this little piece. Take me probably 30 seconds, even less if I just start. So what I forgot to mention was that where the stick mag was involved on your 1928A1 and your M1s, they were a 20 round magazine. And it was later where they went to the 30 round magazine. So forgot to mention that. Also, the M1 and M1A1 could not accept a drum magazine. So that cutout or whatever that they had was eliminated completely. So you could not do a drum magazine on these. The other thing that I forgot to mention is that this here has this. Get it to focus. What do you want, camera? There we go. So US property. So that's something I don't think was on all of these that were produced. And I do believe that was put on there because this was a Lend-Lease type firearm again, just like the Savage built Enfields, as in they expected to get these back when the war was over. So just a few things I wanted to make sure were put into this video, so make it a little more complete as far as information goes. So we will carry on. So I'm going to give you some close-ups. I'm going to talk about some of the changes and things that went on with the Thompson submachine gun. So from the 21, or what would be a M1921 version, more of a civilian version, then the military adopting the M28A1. They adopted that in 1938, that version of the Thompson. So the M28 or M1928A1, there's quite a few differences between it and this version. So the M1, which preceded this one, and then some changes again. So we had our M1928A1, Then we did the M1, which eliminated a lot of things and changed a lot of things, simplified things. And then the final version, this M1A1, which I'll just give you some quick examples of what we're talking about as far as differences. And you can look this up on many channels, but I'll just go through it quickly. In the meantime, I did pick up last year at the One Gun Show. This is like a $5 item, but you can put a jag or a brush or whatever, it just threads right in there, just a normal one from your average cleaning kit. So it's an actual cleaning rod for this thing. And then picked up a few of these. These are replica. So it's kind of neat. Repacked, 5th month, 44. So the type of box perhaps that you'd get your ammo issued to you, and you'd fill up your magazines. And so that there, an extra magazine, and again there's that rivet, so it will actually take 5 rounds, but of course it can't fire 5 rounds out of here because the bolt, as I say, is cut and the barrel is blocked, and so that can't happen. So the before I get into some of these changes, big influences through my childhood, they go way back. I mean, this is 1960s for sure. There was the television show Combat, and so Sergeant Saunders, I believe it was, he was always carrying the. I've never read this book, but it's a collector's item in its own. I think it was came out in '66, but there's Sergeant Saunders with his. He had the 1928 version in the TV show. So, and then of course, as a kid, comic books, that was a big thing when I was a kid. And one of my favorites was Sergeant Rock. So, and again, that was his choice of firearm, was the Thompson. Good old comic book. So, what they did was, just like a lot of things, they wanted to cut the costs down. So when they were first building the M1928A1s, I'm just going to call it the 28, it was somewhere around $200. And then they got that down, I think it was $210 in 1939. And then spring of 42, they actually got it down to $70. And then by February of 44, down to $45, and that included accessories, spare parts, and things like that. And so, and they also, by the time they got to this version, had chopped 10 hours off the build, even though that's all a heavy milled receiver. This is not a light thing to carry around. If you pick one of these up, you'd be surprised how heavy it is for its size. It's right around 10 pounds, and then you add magazine, especially if you added the drum magazine, well, on the earlier models, but yeah, you're getting up 11-12 pounds or so. So Auto Ordnance was the company that Mr. Thompson had started back in about 1918 or so, and by the time World War II came along, or prior to, he had sold, and I'm not sure who he sold to, but so he was no longer involved. But Auto Ordnance was still the company that was building these, and then Savage, because there's no way these guys could keep up. Savage was also involved, and this one is marked with a little S somewhere on it. I can't remember where, but this is a Savage built, and this one by its serial number is a later version, so it could be. Oh, I think they stopped in right around the end of 1944, I believe. So what they did was. So you started out with drum magazines, and drum magazines, I know the Canadians and the British were the first ones. They were shipping these out because the Americans weren't involved in the war yet. They were shipping these over, and I know that they preferred to have their sling, which is more of an Enfield style sling, mounted up top in that kind of affair instead of slung like so. This one's got the canvas type sling on it. And so they complained about that magazine when they were first getting the 1928 A1s. They're complaining because it was too heavy and it rattled, and so not good. So big differences. The older versions prior to the war had a kind of a pistol grip affair up here for the foregrip, and they changed to this style. They took the cocking lever and moved it from the top down to the side. The M1s had just a simple peep sight. This has actually got a peep sight and a groove, or a notch, sorry. And so the M1s had that. The M1A1s, they started putting on this guard. The M1 and M1A1, you can't remove the buttstock where you could on the others. And so there's those differences. No longer had the finned barrel for cooling. They changed the bolt quite a bit. M1 still had a floating firing pin and a hammer, where the final version, it's just one solid block with a fixed pin on the front. So really simplified, and it worked just fine. Matter of fact, I believe from the 28 model, this increased by about 100 rounds a minute, possibly. They added this reinforcement washer and bolt, so that was added. They no longer, because the old ones had quite a fancy sight, so there was another cost-cutting measure. The rear sight was a Lyman flip-up sight, and you could adjust your elevation and windage back there. So they got rid of that. Had this whole fancy blish lock type bolt, as I mentioned. They totally changed that. It wasn't necessary after all. Mr. Thompson thought that was a good idea, and it worked fine, but not necessary. And so they operated then just on this straight blowback system. And those drums, as I say, they could either hold 50 or, believe it or not, 100 rounds of ammunition. So this one here, they had something like 285,000 M1, about double that many of the M1A1s, and it's quite possible a lot of the M1s were converted to this style as well. So your M1 is a lot harder to find. Total production for World War II was 1.5 million of these. So I'm going to get myself in a position here now to just take this apart for you, show you what it all takes to take it down and then put it back together. So what we'll do, first thing, is take that magazine out. So that's simply that. And then on the back side here, there's a little pin. So I'm going to pull the trigger. So I'll push that pin down and then pull the trigger. Oh, I've got to take it off safe, sorry. That's there. And I've got to just push forward. And so now this thing, we'll just, yeah, there's the trigger comes into play. So now we've separated it, and you can see how that all still functions. And they had a little trap door there for a little oil bottle. I don't have an oil bottle for this. Kind of hard to find. I can find them available. I think they were meant more for the M1928 model, and I can't find any around here, and they won't ship from the US to Canada, anything that's a firearm part. If anybody knows what AAY stands for, that would be cool. So here we have a bit of a close-up. So this is locked, but it's simply, I believe too, if you were to compare right away, you can tell Savage built or auto ordnance is that full auto. If I can move that. Yeah, I can't quite make it out there, but it's all one line on the other type, and I think full auto is covered up. Auto is covered up by this lever, but the Savage ones that had full and then auto here, whereas the other had full auto across that way. That was auto ordnance. So we have that, and then to disassemble the rest of it, to get our bolt out, I'm going to just take that like that and position that there. So I've got to push on this button, which is going to relieve tension on this buffer. So the buffer can actually pop right out. And so now I've got the spring and everything out. Simple. And then for the bolt, we're going to just come back, and when it gets to that point there, it'll drop down into that groove or notch. Sorry, I'm off camera, but yeah, we just move back to that notch, pull that out, and then we can lift the bolt out, and I can show you what's been done. So normally there'd be a bit longer piece on here with there's your extractor, but with a pin. But the bolt is just one solid piece. So going back together again, the way I do it is I'll slam that in there. I'll get this lined up. So that's like so. And then I take the spring, return spring, and I'll just place it in the back of the hole in that bolt. Now I found that, so this can go in either way, but if I come back with the bolt, then it's easier to get that in. So I just keep tension on there, put in the buffer. So there, that goes together. And then we'll get all of our sling affair lined up. So that all we should really have to do is, again, we'll pull the trigger. It snaps into place, and that's it. So that's disassembly. Here's the other side of the gun. You can see the markings there. There's your Thompson trademark. So that is focused, hopefully. And yeah, so hope you enjoyed that. I wish this thing would work. That would be a lot more fun. I would love to give you that kind of video, but the laws or my license doesn't allow it. So, and I think that even those that can possess a fully functioning one, as even in New Zealand, you can have one that works, but you can't shoot it. So, it can be fully functioning, but you're not allowed to shoot it. So that would be the case with the prohibited license as well, as far as I know. And so, for now, thanks for watching.